And welcome to AV Tech Talks. Thank you guys for joining us. Omar, you want to go over the house rules with everybody?
Yeah. So thanks for being here, everybody. These are the house rules for the AV Educate AV Tech Talks. We go live every Monday at 7 p.m. We will start going back to Mondays in November. Right now, we're doing Sundays because of some work scheduling conflicts, but we are going back to Mondays starting November. Was that second, I believe, is the 1st of November we're going back on?
That's correct.
Right. If you guys want to join us, please send a text to 407-504-7690. Again, that number to join us on the Zoom side is 407-504-7690. Send us a text on that side. We'll get you on the mailing list. Once you're on the mailing list, you'll get an email from us about joining the Zoom talks. Next up on the house rules for everybody is due to the nature of streaming, if you guys see any lagging or bugging on your side, please just go ahead and refresh that window real quick. Most of the time, it's just an internet thing, and it's not really too much on either or side. But we encourage you guys to understand that these are the natures of streaming. They are expected, so please work with us on that. This is, it is what it is. Be the sharpshooter in the room. Ask your questions. Ask lots of questions, especially on this talk with Chris Brown because he's very knowledgeable and he has got tons to give you guys. So be that sharpshooter. Ask questions. There are no dumb questions. Again, we don't know everything. We say that every show. We don't have all the answers. We're here to help. The panelists here helps us with that. They give stories, information, and insights to us that help with the community out. And on the other side as well, we impose what we know and believe based on our experiences and our expertise within the industry. And last little page here, guys, before we get into the main talk. I know everybody's waiting for this and excited about it. The last page I ask is, the whole session is a live Q&A session. Again, as we said at the beginning, this is all live. So ask your questions. We will get to them. If we don't, we will get back to you at another time with that person. And again, a shameless plug. If you guys are new to our channel, please share the channel. Please get people involved with us. The more we can get involved, the more people we can get on the show with us, the more we can help grow the audience and the knowledge base that we share with everybody. All rising tide rises on both type of scenario. And that is the end of house rules. Ed, I will shoot it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Omar. Just getting myself situated here for a second. You can get your camera back up if you'd like. So hello, everyone. We're on AV Tech Talks. We'll welcome our panel. All our panelists are here tonight. Thank you guys for joining us. Our guest tonight is our own co-host, Chris Boddie Brown. So he's going to lead us through some computer anatomy, which is going to be great. I guess by show of hands in our panel, how many of you guys have computers? Okay, cool. Wow, that's like unanimous. That's amazing. Has anybody built a computer here? Dave's got like 50 over there. Okay, so we've got people who've built them, or anybody upgraded if you haven't built, I guess. Yeah, there you go. Cool. So there should be tons of input coming from the panel today. Hopefully out on Facebook, you guys have built computers or looking to upgrade computers or have questions about computers. So if you have those questions, throw them in the comment section now. If you're watching on the webinar side, same thing. Throw your questions in, upvote them if someone asks a great question, and we will get to them live. So with that, if you don't have anything else, Omar, does anybody have anything, anybody have like a horror story with installing, building a computer or upgrading something? Anybody ever fry something? Dave's smiling, so I feel like Dave might have a...
I was an early adopter of Apple Macs, and I let the magic smoke out of two of the old beige boxes twice.
Wow.
But
twice.
That was just from working them so hard with Mac Paint.
With Mac Paint, wow, that's impressive, actually. Omar, what's your...
So I wasn't during the initial build, but apparently what ended up happening was we built and actually Chris was involved in this build. We built a server for the islands out in the Caribbean for Reslam and like just custom computer. What ended up happening is they left it in a warehouse, I guess, and however we put the CPU onto the motherboard wasn't, I guess, whatever, and maybe Chris has a better technical term for this, but it corroded the CPU or somehow moisture got in there and caused a bunch of problems. So they sent it back to us. Couldn't figure out the problem for the life of us, and obviously sent it to Chris, and Chris opened it and was like, oh, here's the problem. I mean, it took the whole thing apart to find it, but Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
pretty
that
low.
one was an interesting one. I personally have never seen that happen before. I know it obviously can happen because let's be real, thermal paste when you're putting on a CPU and you're putting any type of cooler any type of cooler, whether it's a custom loop, internal loop, or a fan blower cooler, it is not sealing completely off. So there is where for water and things to get underneath there. So wherever they had this thing stored must have had some type of moisture in the building and in the warehouse, because it looked like they left it in salt water for about a week.
Ouch.
Yeah. So it will happen.
Gotcha.
I remember that one.
Dave, you talked already. Who else said they had built a machine? Andreas, have you built a machine?
I've taken them apart, but not built them.
Okay.
I've had to build a few. Pro tip for the night: once the heatsink on the CPU is full of cat hair, it stops cooling. I lost a CPU on that one.
The cats will get you every time.
Maintenance of a CPU is something that a lot of people overlook, as far as cleaning out your radiators, cleaning out your fan intakes, cleaning out the dust covers that are on your CPU is something huge that people do miss. They just figure, oh, it'll be fine, especially when you have cats, dogs, animals like that. I recently, even with this one that I'm working off of now, in the old house where before I moved into this one, the way my CPU was situated, my computer was situated, the cat would always lay by my computer. And I'm like, why I'm getting high temps? I'm like, this isn't normal. And I went to the back plate where the two exhaust fans are on the back of them. And I have 180 millimeter fans. So it's moving some exhaust air out of that. So I've got two of them. So I have 460 millimeters of airflow. And I'm like, why am I overheating? This shouldn't be happening. I took the dust covers off and it was literally like a blanket of cat hair. I'm like, oh, this will do it. So, by the way, I'm Boddie. Everybody that's been here around or kind of been around, I was not here last week. Thank you guys for taking over and doing an amazing job last week on the show while I was in my absence. I know you guys can handle this and take it all for yourself. I see some new faces on the panel. Thank you guys for being here. From me, I am the resident IT idiot, and I say that with all loving and compassion. Why I say IT idiot? Because I'm too lazy to go to school and get a degree. I have, as you can see in the bio of the show tonight, I have taken the Microsoft cert exam. Not legitly, because I'm too lazy to go to a course for 4 years to take one test to determine my life. I have taken the Microsoft cert exam through other people who were going to school for IT, and they're like, oh, I'm taking this exam. Oh, let me see your test. Here's the practice test. Oh, you haven't missed a question. Why do you go to school for this? Because I'm too lazy. Plain and simple. I love computers. Computers are my passion. Computers are everything to me. As Omar has stated, I built a couple PCs for him, for servers that he's used elsewhere. I've helped a couple Ed with a few things for his PCs that he's picked up. Andreas has picked my brain a little bit. There's been a couple of you guys out in Facebook world for us that have reached out to me personally and said, hey, what is this doing and why is it doing this? And that's what I'm here for. I'm just, my knowledge that I can provide to everybody else. Obviously, there is things that I can do that I can't tell you to do that you're going to be able to do. Happened just recently. Omar called me and said, hey, how do I do this? This is how you do it. Him and somebody else are going, what? And I'm going, it's this. And they're like, I don't know how to do that. And I'm like, I'm telling you how to do it. No. Okay, fine. I get it. There's things that I am going to explain or that I can tell people that they might not understand. Just for reference, and I kind of like showing my beast off because I'm super proud of my beast. So here is my computer that I have going right now. For everybody that's around, this case is 2 foot. I know the camera angles are weird. Excuse me, I'm using a webcam here. This is a 2080 graphics card with 32 gigs of RAM. It has 14 cooling fans and 6 exhaust fans. There is my all-in-one loop cooler there. Behind that NZXT is a Ryzen 2700X octa-core processor. Runs at 3.6 gigahertz and turbo boost to 4.2. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to kind of go through and explain everything to you. Things have changed in the world and landscape that we're in life when it comes to CPUs and GPUs and motherboards and RAM and everything that goes down. And I will explain how to properly cool those components and vent your PC properly. So that way you don't end up with the magic smoke of death that Dave explains, because that is one thing, and there's no shade being thrown here. I have been so beat up on because I am not a Mac guy. Macs are traditionally known for having horrible airflow, plain and simple. That's just where I stand on it. Anybody can argue it with me, but they have these great radiator cases. They're only fancy. They're only fancy. That's all they are. Because as David explained in his previous, yeah, they did have a big heat problem in their like 5th generation series where you were going through 3 or 4 PCs before you were getting one that wouldn't overheat. Omar?
Hey, so actually, I have a question for you inside of the Q&A here, which
Okay.
is perfectly into what you're talking about right now. So one of the attendees are asking, Greg Gibson, can you describe basic airflow inside a PC? For example, one thing that always confuses me is which way to point the fans on a radiator. Best place for intake, best way to exhaust.
Okay, so that is a case by case dependent. And what I mean figuratively and literally. Figuratively based on the case that you're using. Like for instance, for me, my case that I'm using is 2 foot by 2 foot by 28 inches tall. It's a big case. It's meant for custom loop water cooling, which I don't have in yet. That's something I'm planning on putting in. But it all depends on the type of case that you get with the airflow. Like for instance, as you've seen when I showed my case, I had the 3 fans on the bottom. Those are exhaust fans. And then on the top, I have 6 fans alone on the top that are actually dragging in air. And then I also have another 3 fans on the back that are pulling air out, 3 fans on the side that are pulling air out. So it all depends on your case. Now, going through a radiator, it's all depending on how you set it up too. You can do a push-pull method on radiators, which is an AIO cooler. Most AIO coolers have a radiator to them, or custom loop water cooling have radiators to them. It all depends on your placement. So you have fans in front of the radiator shroud. You're obviously going to have it pulling the air out, pulling the air through the radiator, cool it down. Or if your radiator is on the outside and the fans are on the inside, you're going to be pushing the air through it to cool it down. So I know it's a little hard to explain, but I'm going to bring up some pictures and diagrams with that to kind of show you how it would look in a system, and where I can explain what I mean by before and after and things like that. But it's all literally a case by case dependent thing. I had the NZXT i500 case. I had 1 exhaust on the back and 1 exhaust on the top, and 4 intakes on the front. It just all depends. A normal form factor case will typically be intake on the front, exhaust on the back, and top. Always. You'll usually have 1 intake. We'll usually have an exhaust on the back by the AIO plate, an exhaust on the top of the case, and then your fans that go in the front, or on some actually newer cases, you have the front of the case, and then on the side, they actually have a fan shroud there where you can have air bring in from there. And it's all dependent on how that case is built and designed for the airflow, which you should get when you purchase the case. There should be a manual diagram in there and tells you how the airflow is best suited for that case to cool the components in your computer down. Go ahead, Fred.
So I had a question. I know that you said that you are venting down. Why do some people go opposite of physics? Heat rises. Normally I would always think on my computers, the exhaust is up the top and out the back.
Correct.
Why do people try to make the air go the other direction?
I can't answer that honestly, because that is not the proper way in order to build the PC. The reason why I have the 3 exhaust fans on the bottom is because the way my case is designed to be a circular airflow. So my case is designed to be intake, outtake, and that's why I say it's based on a case base. My case is.
It was supposed to be a water loop. Okay, I got you.
I'm sorry.
Because you said earlier your case is supposed to have a water loop in it.
Correct, exactly. But even if you don't use a custom water loop, it does have a recommendation of how the airflow in the case is. My case is a square case, so the way and it's glass paneled front, so the airflow comes from the top, bottom, out the back. So it's pushing fresh air down, pulling the hot air out is how that goes for that case. And it is dependent. Most cases are like how you said, where it's rear or upper exhaust and lower intake.
Looked like, sorry, I think Dave had a question there.
Yeah, I
Or
think a
comment?
lot of cases don't suck air in at the bottom because they
Nope.
turn into vacuum cleaners.
Yes, they
They
do.
just suck all the dust off the floor, and you don't want all that inside your case.
Right. In most form factor cases, like I say, have that fan shroud in the front for the intake, and then the rear and the top are the exhaust. Most form factor, like for instance, this case here, I'll do a screen share in a second. Let me pull it up for you. This is the case that I was just speaking of that I moved my PC out of here. So can you guys see that?
We weren't hearing you there for a second, Chris.
Oh, I apologize. Can you guys see that I'm sharing
Yes.
right now?
Yep.
So this is the case that I came from. This is an NZXT H5100. This is what my PC was in prior. So in the front here, can you see the little the mouse cursor?
Yes.
Okay, in the front here, see this gnarled thumb screw? So if you were to use a custom AIO cooler that would have a radiator, you could put the radiator in front of that here in this covered area, and then have the fans right here pushing the air through it. Or you could put the fans inside. It's like a class that comes in. But anyway, my point is you're pulling the air from the front here. Right here is where all the fans go. This is all gradiated here. It's all perforated for the airflow to come through. Then you see the fan shroud back here and the fans up here. So this case is designed for airflow to come in this way and out this way. And here's a good representation of where I'm trying to see the front of the case. See, this is the back of the case here. See how it has the mounting in the front here for the fans. So that's where the intake is, and the outtake is through the back and the top. So that's where that comes from. So like Fred was saying, yes, most cases you don't exhaust from the bottom, you exhaust from the top and the back, and that's design, and it's case by case basis. And like I said, when you buy a case like this, it comes with directions basically of where the airflow comes through, and they have diagrams and actually specifications of, hey, airflow goes this way. So keep in mind that when you're building as well, some cases are designed, if you use a GPU or a graphics card, some cases are designed to have the graphics card inverted and standing better for cooling versus normal slotted in your PCI Express slot. So, and I love all the questions, so just keep them coming, because most of this talk is going to be case based and information that you want to ask. I can sit here and talk about gigahertz and RAM and different types of GPUs and things like that, and go over all of that and bore the hell out of you with a lot of this stuff. But most of this stuff is, what do you guys want to hear from me? So like I can go, for instance, one of the things I brought up and was going to talk about is streaming being a big topic right now. What we're doing now, what a lot of you guys are moving to, is a big stream era where you're doing Zoom conferences, or you're doing webinars like ours, or you're doing classes or anything. Your basic stream PC is going to want a quad core computer that runs above 3 gigahertz. Okay, so what I did is, I am more of an AMD fan when it comes to the CPU, just because the price per performance, and that's one thing we're going to touch on, the price per performance in some of the AMD CPUs are way above those of its counterpart in Intel. Intel has always been known as the big dog on campus when it comes to CPUs. Relatively speaking, in the past 3 years, AMD's come out swinging hard, and AMD said, we're taking it back. And they have. If they could, honestly, and this is my only slight on AMD, if they could get their driver specifications for their GPUs down, they would take over Intel and NVIDIA altogether and smash everybody into the, they couldn't even compete. Because you can get the same GPU that does the same graphical processing as one of NVIDIA's top cards for half the price right now. But because their drivers are trash and they can't update them properly and keep them functioning properly, nobody goes AMD, because they spend more times reverting their driver and doing all that than they do doing anything else on the computer. So, for instance, the Ryzen 3s is the newer cards that are out right now from AMD. So I did something right here where this is a comparison that I'm going to show you guys. This is a comparison right now where this AMD Ryzen 3 3200G is the newest 4-core. The comparative to that in Intel would be this i3 8100. It is 4 cores, 4 threads, which threads are computing power per core. I think we've already talked about that, and then a couple other talks about what the threads are. It's how much it can handle and how much multitasking it can handle is what the threads mean. So it like, for instance, my computer that I said, I have the Ryzen 7 2700X. It is 8 cores, but it is 16 threads, so it can multitask on a higher frequency level than, say, a CPU that's 8 core, 8 threads, and they are out there. So it has been stigma in past that Intel is better at single core performance than AMD. That is not the case anymore. AMD has caught up, if not surpassed, with their newer generation, that they can handle just as well, if not better in most cases, on single core performance than multi-core performance. AMD has always been better at multi-core performance than Intel, always. It's just always been the case. That's why most of your Macs actually run on AMD. Most of your graphical computing stations that you would use to do graphical processing or artwork or videography or anything like that always ran on an AMD, because they could handle the large compression files over everything that you were doing in one task. Like I said, I can get very nerdy with this, so just bear with me for a second and I'll get through it all and we'll answer some questions. So what I'm showing here is the equivalent of what Ryzen's come out with and what the Intel has come out with. Intel's i3 is $115. The Ryzen 3 is $118. They both came out, as you can see, it looks like AMD's catching up on technology. This came out Q4 of 2017. This came out Q2 of 2019. So AMD has, again, like I said, taken a while to catch back up, but here's where they destroy it. 4 cores, 4 threads at 3600. This processor is 4 cores, 8 threads at 4.3 gigahertz and can turbo boost to 4.25. What does that mean? It can handle more tasks quickly and more efficiently over its predecessor here in Intel. The lower memory latency has always been on Intel's side in the past. This one is no exception to that. Intel has always made a memory latency inside their CPUs that better communicates between storages and the RAM on your motherboard. So your RAM speed is actually calculated. The amount of RAM and the amount of speed you can put through your RAM has always been calculated based on the type of CPU you have. So your CPU is dependent. Your CPU is dependent on what kind of RAM you put in. So you ever go look at RAM and you see, oh, why is this RAM? It's 32 gigs for this memory, but it's 32 gigs for this one. This is $116. This is $289. Well, this one's 1666 megahertz frequency, and this one's 3200 megahertz frequency. That's a huge difference when it comes to your memory latency and how fast things can move. So Intel actually has their own SSD that's called Intel Optane memory that works only on Intel cards. It basically takes an M.2 storage device and turbocharges it. So instead of a 10 gigabit per second transfer rate, you're getting equivalent of 16 to 17. Is it worth it? No, it's really not. Because when you're talking M.2, it goes so fast as it is right now, it's not really worth that extra decision making over $3 difference in this case. So again, this was just to bring up an example of the equivalent of what an AMD would be versus what an Intel would be. So there is counter comparative to every AMD card to every Intel card. So that's just to kind of show you what's out there. I know I went through a lot really quick, really fast, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and I'm going to take any questions anybody has.
Yeah, so Boddie, I got one for you, and I'm gonna modify this one a little bit. So when it comes to streaming, the question is really how much GPU is actually needed for streaming. So is it GPU, CPU, or is there another factor we need to consider when it comes to the streaming portion of this on building a computer?
That is a great question. So your CPU obviously has a lot to do with it because you're using H.264 encoding in order to stream. But there's this little thing that NVIDIA has done and made NVEC encoding. Excuse the noise in the background. My 3 kids are getting dinner right now, so I do apologize. There is this little thing that NVIDIA has produced called NVEC encoding, which helps to take the encoding away from the CPU solely, making the CPU its only job. Each graphics card that NVIDIA puts out has its own dedicated VRAM to it. So it basically takes that memory and that processing power and it allows it to be encoded through everything. I think me and Andreas were just talking about one. He's waiting for the new 3090 and 3080 cards to be released from NVIDIA. But I told him in the meantime, the great option is $200, $289.99. So just say $300 for a 1660 Ti. It's a 6 gigabit card, can still do NVEC encoding, which will allow you to take away some of that processing power. So the question is it's more of a dependent question on what you're going to be doing. If you're solely using that computer for streaming and streaming alone, you can get away with a quad core processor and a low end graphics card like a 1660 Ti or a 1060 card or something like that, to where you're stepping back in an old generation that's been released 2 or 3 years ago, but it's definitely enough to keep you moving forward until everything gets better. Now, I would say for anybody who's looking to build a streaming PC, I know you don't want to hear this because right now the time is ripe and the time is fire to build a streaming PC to keep on going and doing what we're doing in this virtual world that we're going into. But I promise you, if you can make a investment in yourself for streaming equipment, do not go best is better practice here. And here's why I say that. Because you can, what I mean by best is better practice here, let me rephrase that because I don't want anybody to think, well, hold on, why wouldn't you want to use this? Okay, so what I mean by best is better practice here is don't build an $8,000 machine for your stream PC right now, because with the things that are coming out in Q1 of next year, you'll be able to build a monster of a stream PC for a fraction of the cost. Okay, and that's just based on both Intel side and AMD side and graphic card side. So these 3080 cards that nobody can get their hands on right now, what sparked that is because of Bitcoin. We're still in the Bitcoin phase where everybody thinks I need this to build Bitcoin. They're realizing nobody gives two rat's ass in a better comparative of the 3080. They're realizing I don't want that because Bitcoin has gone to the wayside and that's the end of it. You can do so much more. They found actually alternate power to create Bitcoin other than a GPU. So all these people that are buying these 3080s are putting them on eBay for $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 and hoping some sucker buys them because they're desperate enough to buy one. Don't. You're only going to feed the market and you'll be able to get it for $400, $500 in the next month or two, because they're going to realize, shit, it's not selling and all these suppliers are getting them in and I can buy it for $750 versus you off eBay for $1,400. So, and Jeff Keithley is absolutely right. I see his comment on Facebook. They are being grabbed by everybody in the VR world right now because of their 16 gigabit VR RAM that is on them. They are the first graphics card that has dedicated memory for virtual reality. So before virtual reality was actually post-processed on your CPU, it is now all processed on the GPU itself. So he is absolutely right on that. But most of these people that are grabbing them aren't grabbing them for VR, because the first 1,000 that were released, 990 of them were found on eBay. So, but that's just me. So any other questions?
Let Nina
All
go
right.
ahead and take this one.
Yeah, so I guess to follow up on that, what would, when you're building your PC, and this is a big question, is how to future-proof for your PC so that it's your long-term investment into the computer, instead of, like, you're saying, not to do best now, but think about, Q1 next year and ongoing into the future, how to best have your investment appreciate.
Absolutely, and completely understand that. So what I mean by best is, so you can get with both Intel and AMD, you can get a motherboard that can cross-platform or cross-generationalize, excuse me. So like, for instance, AMD and Intel both have the LG, Intel right now is LG 1151 socket. And that's what the CPU actually sits on in your motherboard. For those who don't know, I'm not trying to get super geeked out and in depth here. I'm trying to cover everybody here to best explain it. So the socket that the actual CPU sits on an Intel is called an LG 1151 socket, and AMD is using an AM4 socket. Right now is the most common sockets on motherboards. So there's different generations of motherboards though. Like, for instance, my motherboard is an X470. It's an AM4 socket, right? So the new Ryzen 5 series, the new Ryzen generation that was just announced in August, can work on my motherboard. Correct. Yes. But it will need a BIOS update. So what that means is you will have to go into your BIOS of your computer or have somebody knowledgeable enough to be able to go in the BIOS of the computer and upgrade the BIOS to be able to accept that new CPU. But wait a minute. What's the difference between an X470 and an X570? X570 is already BIOS updated. It's already future-proofed for the next 2 generations. And that's the same thing with Intel. Intel has like B450s or 390s. X390, I think, is the most popular motherboard right now for an Intel. And if you're building an Intel, I definitely recommend going with an X390 because the X390 will allow you to go through the generations of Intel and be able to say, okay, I'm using the i9 9D900K right now, and I want to upgrade to the i9 10008K, the newer one. You can still do it without having to go through a BIOS upgrade because the X390 has it already factory set into them. Then again, there are some motherboards out there in those categories that I was saying, those lower end categories that aren't really super high end, that have automatic BIOS updating when you start your computer. Where your computer, you ever notice sometimes you turn your computer on, it takes about 5 minutes before it actually gets to the splash screen because your computer is automatically updating the BIOS in the background. So it's just a matter of where you want to go. I always recommend talking with somebody before you build a computer, always, unless you already know what you're doing. Obviously, I'm not sitting here and saying, oh, no, you need to do this or no, you need to do that. So my thing would be, sorry, I got to shut the sound off on my phone. My thing you need to do would be to definitely talk with somebody that you're comfortable with that knows computers and kind of bounce ideas off of them and be like, hey, I'm building a computer and this is what I'm looking for it to do. And what do you recommend? Or Google's your best friend, research. And then if you have any questions, you can ask. I'm sure not everybody here who has ever built a computer started off just out the gate knowing. So my background in computers came from, and my mother's actually around here somewhere and she can actually verify it, given a computer at 10 years old and said he can have it if he can build it. And I did. So that's where it came from. I have just always been in love with the mechanics of a computer and how it operates and how it runs. And I do have an A+ certification in hardware acceleration and hardware engineering of a computer.
So I wanted to keep us on track here. We're 15
Absolutely.
minutes to the hour right now. Another good question that came in, and these are going to kind of be on order because I want to keep going with your flow that you have. And this may take you back just a little bit, but why is the refresh rate for the Intel processor faster than an AMD processor?
Why is the refresh rate? Because the cache memory on an Intel processor is always higher than on an AMD processor until, again, this new generation of AMDs that are coming out have higher cache refreshes than the Intel counterparts to them. Intel is that's just the way Intel is it's always been that way with Intel. Intel has always had a higher cache rate, L3 or L2 cache rate over its AMD counterpart. So that's what it has to do with. So your CPU, for instance, like I had the, let's go back to the Intel demonstration that I had up here. So pull back up. That's great. Thank you, computer. I greatly appreciate that. 1 second, guys. It just like good old Google Chrome just shut down on me. So I have to restart it back up to get the information. So for instance, like I was saying with the Ryzen one, playing with me and I don't like it. All right, so the cache on the L3, L2, and L1 cache on that Ryzen is roughly around 1 megabit to 4 megabits, whereas its counterpart on the Intel side is 6 to 7 megabits. So on that card specifically, yes, the refresh rate on the Intel would be faster, but it also has to do with the actual memory that you have paired with that CPU. So for instance, I don't know if anybody knows this, but AMD and CPU have preferred RAM that they rather use. They run on certain gigahertz, megahertz refreshes. So that also has to do with your BIOS setup as well. So, like for instance, when I built my computer, my CPU can handle 3,200 megahertz of refreshing on the memory, but my BIOS was only opened up to 2,800 or 2,886, the factory. So you have to go in the BIOS and let the BIOS know that you are using a higher memory than what it's seeing. And that's just how it is. Intel is not locked that way. AMD has been. So Intel automatically recognizes, hey, I put 3,200 megahertz RAM in. We're going to run it at all speed, whereas AMD hasn't. So if you have an AMD computer or an AMD processor that you're seeing that, check your memory that's in your computer and see what the refresh rate is on that memory. And then go into your BIOS setting, or you don't even have to go into your BIOS. You go into your task manager, you look up the computer itself. It'll tell you what refresh rate that's running at. If it's telling you you have 3,200 megahertz, but you're only running at 2,800, your BIOS probably has locked you at the factory settings of the AMD. You need to open it. You need to basically go into the BIOS settings and say, hey, I'm using 3,200. AMD is locked out like that, where you have to go in and tell AMD to do a lot of the things on its own. And that's where I have watched and sat in on numerous webinars for AMD because I am AMD bias. I just am. The price per performance when it comes to AMD versus the Intel counterpart, you can't beat, because I can get a processor that does the same thing for $300 that you're paying $700 to do. And it's equivalently the same. There's very minor lag space in it.
So I want to add one more to you, Boddie, just to play on your better nature of your kind-heartedness. So Jesse asks us a question, and this is a two-part question, so we don't have to answer the full of it. But any issues to watch out for with the AMD processor for a VMix machine? Any experience with the 360Xs and VMix in particular?
Okay, so from what I've understood and everything that we've done with VMix, we have been told AMD doesn't play well with VMix. Am I right or am I wrong in that? I think that's who was it that presented for VMix that one night? I apologize, I don't remember his name off the top of my head.
That was Leland Best, and it's and he runs an AMD setup. It's not so much that they don't play nice; it's that VMix was specifically designed to run on Intel. So you do run into some oddities that are there, but it's not that it doesn't run. It's just that there are some quirks because it was specifically an Intel-based design.
Correct, and that's what I was getting at, is that when Leland was on, that I just couldn't remember his name. When Leland was on, he did express that VMix is an Intel-based setup. The only issues that he found in running AMD himself was cursor lag when he was coming across. Now, I don't know if there's any more or anything less that has been, but VMix does prefer Intel, but you can use more on that. So, yes, Lisa, right?
Yeah, well, it's not my question. Jeff is commenting on Facebook, and we miss you. You didn't join the webinar today, but he's saying there is medicine for the AMD BIOS issue.
There is medicine for the AMD BIOS issue. I would like more explanation on that.
I know he needs to jump on the webinar. We need to find out more about this this comment he just made.
I do know, like I said, with everything that I've seen with the series of processor that I'm using, I didn't have to go in and unlock my BIOS. Like I said, I'm using the AMD Ryzen 7 series. I didn't have to unlock my BIOS, and the newer ones, you're not going to have to do that with either. So I would be interested what he means by medicine for the AMD. That'd be awesome.
Jeff likes to drop in these little tidbits and then
disappear.
Well, it doesn't disappear, but you know, we're trying to get Jeff back to do a talk on remote production in the cloud, because that's what he does a lot of. So all of you on Facebook, you can maybe just poke him and tell him to let us know.
There is a medicine for that AMD BIOS issue. There is no medicine for the AMD BIOS issue here. I am going to tell you that right now, because if you're talking about the medicine that Intel finally, for the first time ever, dropped their prices on all their CPUs to be competitive, it doesn't match. Like I said, we're going to start an infight here, because we're going to get Intel versus AMD going here. And it's just purely my point here is I can get a processor that does 8-core, 16 hertz, or 8-core, 16 threads for a fraction of your Intel price.
It looks like Stan wants to say something from the attendees side.
Go for it. Muted if he's trying to talk. I don't know how to do that. That's Ed's
Yeah,
side.
sorry.
He has to allow you to unmute him.
So while we work on that part here, let me just ask you another one question. A little bit off topic, but not too far off. What type of capture card should you use? USB 3.0, PCI Express, or onboard capture card if available?
Absolutely, always an onboard capture card. Always PCI Express. Always on. If you can, with computers, anything with computers, it's always better to be hardlined versus cabled. Anything, internet, capture cards, cameras, whatever the case and scenario is, your Blackmagic NDI switches and things like that. If you can hardline them into the PC, i.e. PCI Express ports or anything like that, it's always better. Not saying that it won't work as well. It's there. It's not, oh shit, my USB went out. No, it's on the motherboard. It's done. Night, baby.
And we're not
This is
saying
one
that,
of the little ones that was making all that noise in the background.
so just to clarify, Boddie, though, we're saying if you want the best, I guess, capturing abilities on a PC or laptop, those are the ways to do it. That's not,
If
we're
you
not
have a
talking about the
laptop,
quality.
right, exactly. It has nothing to do with quality. The quality is built into the capture card. So like, for instance, Elgato. I just use Elgato because they're probably one of the most known to the industry. AverMedia is actually a very good one as well. I actually like AverMedia. They're a little more expensive than Elgato. So that's why I go for Elgato, because let's be fair, I'm broke and don't have $1 million to put into everything. Like for instance, I use a 4K 60 plus Elgato capture card in my computer. I have the PCI one. You can get the USB one that does the same thing. It's no different. They do exactly the same thing at exactly the same quality. The only difference is I'm not worried about finding a cable to plug it in or my USB port coming out and things like that. So yes, Bangs is correct in chat. By the way, hi Bangs. Yes, the AMD CPU's performance per dollar is absolutely unmatched on the new AMDs. So he is not wrong there. I don't know if anybody saw the webinar that came out. The new AMD, I think it's the Ryzen 5 5900X, is a 16-core, 32-thread retail processor that's only $600. Prior to that, that was Intel's big dog at $3,000 for the same processor that Intel just came out with. Intel doesn't have an answer for that processor. Their processor is a Xenon processor that's $2,800. That's 12 cores and 24 threads. Still can't beat it. But again, I step back from my AMD bias here.
Great. I want to take a couple questions because we've got a few that are piling up.
Absolutely.
So Randy asked, when building a computer or buying one, would an ultra form factor be recommended pertaining to airflow for video streaming, etc.?
Absolutely would. Ultra form factor computers are the baddest little pieces of machinery there are. And I will tell you right now, for anybody who is trying to build a compact little machine that doesn't want a laptop, ultra form factor computers are micro ITX boards, ITX or ATX boards, whichever you want to use. The ITX boards don't have as much PCI support as ATX boards do. So I would use a micro ATX board in a form factor case that's about the size. You can make them. I don't have anything in comparison here, but just say a box that's 18 inches long, about 5.5 to 6 inches tall, and about 5 to 6 inches wide. And that's your computer all in that little box. And it can do everything that a big computer does. The airflow, they have specifically designed things for those that will help with those too. So like, for instance, you're not going to put a full size, Fred's trying to hold one up, but his green scene's getting in the way there. Something similar to that. That one is a factory one though. That one's not a custom one. So it depends on which one you use. There are, I know Omar has brought in one of those to me before to try to fix, but it was actually an on motherboard issue. that was wrong with that one. It wasn't worth fixing. But some of those little computers are badass enough to do it.
Hey Fred, can you hold that up
There
again?
we go. So that's an HP one. Which one is that, Fred? If you don't mind me asking. I can't see the writing on the front of it.
It's an Elite desk. I just bought this for a bar up the street. I'm going to put this in for basically a Barker channel and to run his sign out front.
Yes. So those little form factor computers are badass. Some of those things are ridiculous. There is actually one out right now. They're a little expensive, but you got to take into account they're custom built. They're not something that's just grab off the shelf and go on all of those. So there is one that is like Intel makes, obviously Intel makes it. AMD has one as well. And I think the Intel one is made by Lenovo and the AMD one is made by, I want to say Acer. But they're about $4,000 for that little micro computer for one I'm about to talk about. The Intel one actually uses the Intel 10, or the Intel 9 10800K, whatever they're calling the processor. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's such a little powerful little beast. They do run hot though on those particular ones. They do run hot. But you can get something like that Fred held up. That little thing is a powerhouse. And if it's something that works in your budget and you can carry around and you can afford to put it in your budget to do that, absolutely. What I was expressing in, they do have small form factor computers that you can actually build in. I was actually working. I have one around here. No, I do.
I think I got that one on Amazon for like $600.
Yeah. So, but what are the specs on that one? Do you remember?
I don't have them right in front of me now. Sorry.
So typically the ones that I've seen that are anywhere between $600 to $1,000, they're roughly, some of them are dual core to quad core processors, about 2.4 to 2.7 gigahertz, 8 gigabits of RAM, and use an onboard graphics card from the CPU. So you can absolutely go cheap with them. Those I do not recommend for streaming, obviously, because that CPU will fry. You will absolutely blister.
For a video Barker channel, that's all it's going to do.
Yeah, you will absolutely. If you tried streaming from that, you would absolutely blister that CPU up. But they do. That's what I'm saying. They do make form factors like that you can purchase that do have better CPUs, more RAM, and a micro GPU in them. And that's what I'm saying. If you look, they do have micro ATX 1060 GTX 1060s, which are single fans. They're about inches long, about 4 inches wide, and about a half-inch thick. And it's a 6 gigabit GPU, and they're designed for micro PCs. So they do have that. Anything else?
Oh yeah, there's a handful here. Why is the refresh rate for Intel processor faster than AMD processors? Did we ask that already?
Yep, we went over that one.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't have it checked off on my list. Sorry about that. Any issues to watch out for with AMD and VMix machines? We talked about that, correct? AMD and VMix, we talked about those issues. What type of capture card should you use? USB 3.0, PCI Express, or onboard capture card if available?
We went over that a little bit. I do recommend PCI Express for that. If you have the ability to put a PCI Express onboard on motherboard capture card. Obviously, your USB 3.0s and things like that are going to be just as efficient. It's me personally, like I said before, I preferred hardwired as much as possible. So if you can put it right on the motherboard and it sits on the motherboard, I'd rather it be there.
Gotcha. So Brent asked, so a laptop could be a viable streaming platform, for example, being a Lenovo P50.
Okay, well, let's take a look at that laptop because I don't know the specs on that one right off the top of my head, and I'll be happy to look at that. But to answer your question in solely, Ed, you're streaming from a laptop right now.
I am currently streaming from an Asus gaming laptop, yes, that I just picked up.
Omar's done 2 jobs with a laptop now, right?
I've done more than 2 jobs with a laptop, yes.
Oh yeah, I've done a ton of jobs, and I've done jobs with a Lenovo laptop. So that did not have, it just had integrated graphics. So,
Right.
So I will say
How you use a
I have done jobs with both Macs and PCs. My VMix machine is on a PC based on a MSI. Mostly everything else I've done though has been through a Mac running either Zoom or PowerPoint or Keynote or streaming out. And I've also done, which I think was particular to this question, if it's just to stream to, like you're using that as an out, like OBS to stream to something, it's totally fine as long as your internet's good.
Absolutely. So just Andreas, you were going to say something?
Yes, I used to a laptop for the I have it right now with VMix and OBS.
Absolutely. And I started streaming on Twitch on this thing right here with an arm reach. I started streaming on Twitch and gaming with this computer. This is an Asus ROG GL702 laptop. It has a GTX 1060 graphics card in it, 32 gigabits of RAM, and an i7 7600K processor. That is only a 2.7 gigahertz quad core processor. It can be done. It absolutely can be done. It's just a matter of what you're trying to do with it. Now, obviously, why I use the computer I use now to stream on Twitch is because I game and stream. This didn't play very nice with streaming and gaming at the same time. I was lucky if I was getting 40 frames a second on gaming, but that's a whole different conversation. That's a whole different avenue to go down when it comes to GPUs and their processing power.
And Nina just brought up a good point I wanted her to address as well that I think is very crucial to this whole laptop scenario.
Yeah, I was just thinking, especially when you were talking about the micro PC and like we're talking about this more like portable system where, so a Mac Mini at its price point, comparing size and everything to a micro PC, like how do you feel about the two?
Mac Minis are very slow. I've not had very good experience with Mac Minis. Again, this is not because I'm a PC snob. This is pure point to the preference. So the Mac Minis, they run on almost the same processor as their iPhone. It's a little bit bigger. So your iPhone runs on about what they call a 4 nanometer CPU. The Mac Minis run on like a 6 nanometer CPU. So you're running an entire PC on something that's running at 1.7 to 2.1 gigahertz when it comes to speed power, and you're using an Adreno quad core processor. And that's why I don't recommend Mac Minis. They ideally run off of a phone's processor. Again, I don't recommend Chromebooks either because they run off of an Android processor. So it's no different. Like if you get a Chromebook, most of their processors are no different than what's in a Samsung Galaxy phone. So it's just, that's what it is. Mac Minis were designed to be small computers for the world, basically. And I don't know if anybody's noticed, they don't really make Mac Minis anymore. So they didn't fare very well to the market because people started understanding what they were actually capable of. And they were spending $1,300 to $1,200 on this Mac Mini when they could buy a MacBook Pro laptop that can do twice as much for the same price. So
Another thing I want to add real quick is, and I know Boddie had some experience about this. So streaming out to multiple platforms versus, a laptop and a PC, where that real bottleneck happens for people when they're trying to stream out to more than one platform from one location. Instead of doing it like, for example, when I've done the shows, we've had, program going to a DAD, going to either Blackman Design turnarounds or the Studio Minis, turning that sit down and going to at least 3 computers to go to 3 different destinations instead of having all that processing power off of just one machine.
okay. So personal experience. My 2700X processor can handle a lot. And trying to stream to Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube about fried my CPU. Within a matter of 10 minutes, my CPU, and I use a 240 millimeter AIO cooler, so I have a lot of cooling going to my CPU. It jumped my processing power up to almost 100%, and my CPU was reaching almost 95 degrees Fahrenheit. As soon as I saw that, I immediately shut my computer down, and that was the end of it for that night because I was not risking turning it back on. What the bottleneck is the CPU power. the CPU, even when you're using the GPU, mind you, when you are using NVEC encoding, it does not completely take it off the CPU. It is helping process some of that power from that CPU. So if you are doing 3 destinations off one PC and you're using NVEC encoding, 9 times out of 10, when you're doing multi-streaming, it won't even allow you to go to NVEC most of the time. Depends on what you're doing. I don't know if VMix allows you to keep it on NVEC while multi-streaming to different platforms or not. I haven't worked with VMix a lot, so I can't tell you if it does or not. But I can tell you from something like OBS, if you try to stream to multiple platforms through OBS, you will need one hell of a CPU to do it because it will not allow you to go into NVEC encoding. Now, if you use a partner company, like for instance, I switched over using MobeCrush, it allowed me to go to multiple platforms without abusing my computer. It still ran pretty hard. So even using a third-party source like Restream.io or StreamYard or any of the other platforms that are out there that can do multi-streaming, it still hinders some of the CPU performance as well. So it just kind of the matter of CPU power, and it's always recommended that you should try to test it before you run it to see if you will need another machine to properly do it.
And Boddie, something you had said a little earlier that I know you touched on real quickly, but it is one of the questions we have. For a streaming video production machine, how much different in performance would a 360 millimeter water cooler radiator make versus a 280 millimeter? Is it worth the difference in price and space?
Okay, so it depends on the processor, and it depends on the area that you're having it in. If it is a hot area, I always recommend going bigger for the 360, so that way it puts a lot of cooling through it. And it also depends on the processor. Some processors do not. Again, I will repeat this because a lot of people out there that build computers think bigger is better. Yes, you are 100% right. If you put a 360 millimeter cooler on that Ryzen 3 3200G we were talking about, it will never reach above 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Never. Because it's never going to put out that much work in order to do it. So it always depends on your CPU. If you're using a really high powered CPU, absolutely, you want 360 millimeter to cool them down. Like the new i10s, the Intel i9 10 series processors that we talked about, they run extremely hot. Now, Threadrippers run extremely hot. Anybody who doesn't know what a Threadripper is, let me back up a second. That is AMD's Excel chip. That is like the Xenon processor for Intel. That is AMD's Xenon. It is called a Threadripper. They are nasty. They are ridiculous. They are still half the cost of Intel and put out twice as much performance, but they are disgustingly fast. I think the minimum Intel, minimum AMD Threadripper runs around, I think it's 24 core and it's 48 thread. And then you can go with the 39 Threadripper 39 or 3900 is 64 cores, 128 threads, and can do up to 240 gigabytes of memory and has 6 M.2 ports on it. It is a ridiculous piece of machinery, but that processor alone is about $4,500, and the motherboard to run it's also about another $1,000. So if you're somebody who's got about 12 G's to drop on just the CPU, motherboard, and the memory, come talk to me. I'd love to build your computer for you. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. So I wanted to point out Bangs, I believe you were referring to him earlier, did say that he's had a lot of success running streaming from laptops, but he also had a wicked fast internet connection of 300 up and down. I also wanted to make a comment that I'm not biased towards Mac or PC. You know, I'll reiterate what Jeff said quite a few times last week, which is the right tool for the right job. And then also to touch on what you said before about, you know, attempting to do multiple streaming off of one device, I would highly advise having a separate encoder if you were going to do multiple streams.
Absolutely not wrong. Everything you said is absolutely on point. Your internet does play a factor. You need, and anybody that's in the AV industry, what is the rule of thumb when you go on a job and you're running on internet? Test it 3 times, take your median. If you're not getting the proper internet levels, you're going to have a shitty experience. Plain and simple, easiest way to put it. So I run on a gig. And there's even sometimes that running on my gig network, I'm like, oh my God, this is not going to work tonight because I'm just having fluctuations in the line. It happens. Going back, I do see Jeff, which Jeff, I love you. Me and you will have our own little battle back and forth over messaging later, I'm sure. But you are absolutely 100% right. I will always go air cooled over water cooled. Way too many factors, way too many things that can go, especially for a machine you carry around. Now, if you're building a desktop to sit in one area and never move, by all means, AIO cool it. It's a closed loop system. There's less room for malfunctions. But if it's something that you're going to be picking up, carrying around, and moving it constantly, air cooled 100%. And you can absolutely do it. Absolutely can do it because they have Noctua. Noctua makes a 300 or 480 millimeter. After everything's said and done, it's 4 fans on one route on one radiator cooling system, and it's about $112 for it. It's a Noctua. It's the Noctua X40 or X480, and it's a monstrosity looking of a thing. Like when you look inside your computer, that's all you're going to see is the cooler, but it will absolutely keep those i9s down in temperature. So like I said tonight, guys, I'll answer any of your questions. When it comes to computer anatomy, it's a lot better to answer the questions than sit here and be literal in this is this because it's very hard to do that because there's a lot of well, this goes into this and then this goes into this. I can tell you what CPU you're using to what pair with your motherboard. I can do all that for you. But do you really want to sit here and watch me ramble on for 2 hours about a bunch of stuff that's not going to answer any of your questions?
Hey, Boddie.
We definitely have questions piling up, but go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
What are your thoughts on just having multiple dedicated, smaller, simpler machines that are interchangeable? So, you got 3 streams going out, have 3 encoders and just, feed them each an NDI source.
Absolutely.
With free versions of, VMix or whatever.
Don't punch yourself in the throat. Might as well make it simple for you. If you have the ability that you can have 3 different racks running it, absolutely. It's going to be way better for you to do it that way. It's going to be more cost effective. It's going to be more time. It's going to be less time consuming because you're not going to be going, okay, is everything running right today? No, you're going to be able to pull all those up and go, everything's running good. We can run, we can operate. Something breaks on it, it's $200 to replace a CPU versus a $1,400 to replace a CPU. So I'm
it doesn't take your
absolutely
whole
a fan.
show out and everything in between,
Absolutely a fan. What I'm working on right now is eventually one day in my life to be able to build and afford a second PC. So that way I can have that PC just encode my stream and my other PC run my game. Absolutely.
So we definitely have questions piling up. So I'm glad you were talking about willingness to take questions, Chris. Del Miller had asked a while back, what do you think about running Boot Camp on a Mac as your main streaming computer if you're traditionally a Mac user? He's also considering buying a new MSI or Alienware machine. Curious to hear your thoughts. He needs a good VMix solution.
Stay away from Alienware. I'm going to tell you that right now, and here's why. You're going to pay twice as much for half the material. Alienware is all in name. It is all Alienware is. MSI, they're a little pricey as well, but what you pay for, you actually get 100%. So MSI, if you're paying $3,000 for the computer from MSI, most of the components in there are going to be about a $2,100 computer to $2,200 built computer by somebody else. Whereas Alienware, you're going to spend $7,000 on that PC and the parts inside of it ain't worth but $2,000. Alienware is like, what's a better way to put it? Trying to think of something. Ford and Chevy and Cadillac. Cadillac is just an expensive Chevy. That's all it is.
Dodge versus BC.
Yeah. So I mean, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So Cadillac is just an expensive Chevy, is all it is, and it's the same thing with Alienware. Alienware is just an expensive PC. You're paying for the name on the product rather than the actual product inside of it. And most of your and I am not absolutely opposed to buying pre-built PCs. I'm not a fan of them because you pay a premium for that PC because somebody else built it, somebody else put it together. Like for instance, Cyber Outlet is one of them, or what are some of the common ones? Cyber Power PC is one of them. Ultima PCs. There's a couple one like that you when you go to Best Buy, it's like their gaming one and it's made by somebody. Those are pre-built gaming PCs by other people. Or I'm not opposed to it, but the problem is when you go to get those, they're built with shit material, to plain and simple. You're paying $1,600 for this PC, and it's got a $50 motherboard in it. It's got generic parts in it versus getting parts that you know are stable. So that's the difference for me. I'm not saying that the parts are crap or that they'll never work for you, because my mother has a CyberPower PC because that's what she could afford and do at the time, and it's a solid PC. It's just a matter of if you have the ability to build it versus buying pre-built, absolutely do it. If you have the ability to wait for parts to come in, wait for everything to come in and build your PC, you get exactly what you want. You know the quality of the material that's coming in. So I'm going to go back to that ThinkPad question that we had about the ThinkPad P50 as a streaming station. I have the specs up here, and it actually looks like a really good computer. It uses there are some of them that use the Xenon processor and some of them that use the i7 6700 and 6800. The only thing that I see problem with them will be the fact that you will most likely have to run it turbocharged constantly. So you'll have to turbocharge the CPU in order to be an efficient machine. It just might be loud. Doesn't mean it's going to do anything different. It's just going to be a loud machine because the fans are going to be working overhaul. And actually, some of those come actually with the NVIDIA Quattro M1000 graphics card, which is a 4 gigabit onboard graphics card. So it's actually not a bad PC to push a stream with. You have the ability to use NVEC encoding with the NVIDIA Quattro, and you have actually a halfway decent CPU. And most of them looks like they come factory with 32 or 64 when you buy the better version of the P50. So it's actually a really good streaming laptop.
Cool. Thanks for getting back to that one. So yeah, we have a lot of questions that are piling up. So I'm going to kind of try to hammer through these a little. Mike earlier had taught, it's kind of a long question, has 3 HP Omen 15 laptops that he's streaming with VMix. One is an i7 8750 CPU with NVIDIA 1060 GPU, 16 gig of RAM. Another has an i7 9750 with an i7 with a NVIDIA 2060 GPU, and a third with an i7 10750 CPU with the NVIDIA 2060 GPU. Using VMix primarily to produce talk shows, 6 to 12 guests, graphics, pre-recorded video segments. He's had good success with all three, but doesn't use the one with the 1060 much for streaming anymore. Any opinions on these for live streaming and using gaming laptops in general for streaming?
The response to that is gaming laptops definitely give you more bang with your buck when it comes to what's in the computer. So like for instance, the one Ed just picked up is the Acer, right?
Asus,
yeah. So
Asus.
he has the Asus. What is it? I forget which one you picked up. I remember we talked about it, but I couldn't.
It's the ROG, the 4K model.
Right. So he's using the Republica Gaming. The M15.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So he's using the Republica Gaming M15. That is a gaming laptop with a 4K display. The reason why I say gaming laptops is because they come factory with those GPUs that are needed to use NVEC encoding. Most of your baseline laptops and things that you pick up, they're going to have onboard graphics cards or use a very small Quadro graphics card. So most of, and what I mean by baseline laptops is like even your high-end ones, like I'm trying to think like the Surface Pros. Surface Pros use an M Quattro 1000, 1 gigabit graphics card in them, onboard graphics card. That's not going to do you jack for streaming. It's not going to help you at all because you're going to max out the virtual memory on the GPU, and you're not going to be able to encode it properly. It's going to glitch, buffer, and all kinds of crap. The CPUs in them aren't as strong as you would think they would be in order to run them as well. But for everything else, they're a very fast little computer and can handle a lot of power that you put to them. But for instance, like the Asus ROG M15, or Omar just got the MSI Ager. Yeah. So you got the MSI Ager, which is another one that has a 2070 Super, I think, in it, right? Yours had the 2070 Super and
No, sorry, not the Ager, the GE66 Raider. It's a
the
20,
Raider. Okay.
yeah, 2070 Super. Yep, GeForce
And then
2070
Ed, yours
Super.
has this 2070 Super as well, right?
Mine is a 2060.
2060 Super. So either way, both of those are very good graphics cards. One's a 6 gigabit graphics card, which can handle. You only need 3 gigabit GPU or more to handle NVEC encoding properly. That is the recommended spec for using NVEC encoding. You can get away with 2 gigabits, but 3 gigabits is that sweet spot for NVEC encoding. So Ed's got a 6 gigabit GPU. Omar's got an 8 gigabit GPU.
Nope, higher. Mine just. So I was super anal about this, guys, and this actually leads into another question down here. But so my cards in particular is a 32 gigabyte.
You have
DDR4
32 gigs of RAM. Your
Correct.
graphics card only has 8 gigabits of VRAM.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I only have 8 gigabits of VRAM. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and that is something super important that he was about to go into. Go ahead and ask your question. I'll answer it from there so we can kind of tee it up.
Well, no. So Brent Chandler asked, in reality, which is why I wanted to bring that up. In reality, most streams are 720p. So is there really a need for a cracking PC? This is a big debate in the industry right now because what Zoom is streaming out versus what HD is streaming out versus what you're producing. For me personally, I want to have more headroom than what I need, for that buffering ability in the back of PC in general.
Absolutely. And most things do stream out at 720p unless, depending on the platform you go to. We've talked about this in our streaming segments before. Definitely, I think it was actually our first ever AV Tech Talks when we talked about OBS and the stream qualities of OBS. It definitely has to do with where you're streaming to. If you're streaming to Facebook, unless you have the certain criteria, Facebook is always going to be 720p 30 frames a second. Twitch is another streaming platform. Until you're an affiliate with them, you are 720p 60 frames a second at least. YouTube, they're the only ones that it doesn't matter what your level is with them. You can stream 1080p 60 frames a second. The problem is discoverability on there is damn near impossible. And then you have other sites that you can go to and other places you can go to. Most of them always start you out at 720. So you have the ability to unlock it and run different ways. It just depends on the level. Like for us here, we need to knock on the door on Facebook and go, hey, listen, we're doing this amazing thing over here. We need 1080p streams, but they won't do it. It's all in their things. But Ed, this is our time to talk about our sponsor. They have allowed us to be able to stream out to 1080p. Take it away, Ed.
Actually, yeah. So we do get a little bit of a bump in resolution. We're getting a full 720 on our Zoom side, thanks to the DVE store for their support. So if you guys check them out at dvestore.com, they can help you with all your video needs. Guy and his team are awesome, and they can help you out. And thanks to them, we are getting the best quality we can on Zoom so that we can stream out at the best quality going to Facebook. So thank you guys at DVE Store. Thank you for your continued support. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. See a little sidebar discussion going on over here.
Oh, there's lots of
there's lots of it, and I love it.
There's so much talk happening on all of my screens that it's very hard to keep up and keep us moving. So what I'd like to do is have another question. Let me just see, what do we got here? Greg Gibson, for a streaming video production machine, how much difference in performance would a 360 millimeter water cooled radiator make versus a 280 millimeter? Is it with the difference in price?
Touched on that one. Yeah, we did touch on that one.
We touched on that. Okay,
yes,
sorry. That got buried. Oh, and it ended up in my spreadsheet twice somehow. Sorry about that. Okay. Randy asked, what kind of hard drive should you use? SATA or solid state hard drive for computer boot up and storing of video and audio files?
Okay. That's a great question. Neither. M.2 if you possibly can. Absolutely. It is you're using solid state hardware SSD versus the you took the question away. Or Humper, stop doing that to me. No, I'm joking. So SATA
it's in the answered side if you need to find it.
Yeah. So Your SATA and your solid state drives are ideally the same thing. Yes, you are right. You don't get trigger happy over there, Mr. Butler. Okay, over there. Yes, here's my point where I'm getting at. Okay, a little smart. I'm gonna talk. Go ahead. Open your mic, Justin. This is all out of love, by the way. I'm not picking on him in any means necessary. This man is very smart when it comes to computers himself, and I have nothing but love for this man.
Don't mind me.
But
I'm
he's
just,
picking on me about calling it an M.2 and not saying yes, it's an SSD as well. Little smart ass. Anyway, it's a trigger point for him. I get it. I did it on purpose, actually, just to mess with him. But your SATA and SSDs are ideally the same thing because your SSD, your solid state drive, plugs into a SATA port on your computer. So the M.2s are the little sticks that look like memory almost. They plug into what's essentially called an M.2 slot on your computer. They are 10 times faster than your standard SSD. So I recommend them for all your boot, all your video, and all your audio files, especially if you're running a show. If you can find a laptop that does have M.2 in it, you're already ahead of the game. And a lot of your laptops are already coming with them. They're already coming with 1 terabytes or 512 gigabytes. Most of them are even coming, so 1 terabyte, 512. Very rarely, your low end ones right now are coming standard with M.2 256. So yeah. So to answer that question, I recommend M.2 SSDs in order to run all your stuff because it's ideally faster in show will be better.
Great.
Because of the bus, right? Because it's tied into the what do you call it? The bus on the computer. It's not
absolutely. It's not going through any other channel. It's not requiring a line. Basically, it's like USB. It's like a USB capture card versus a PCI capture card. It's already on board. It's running better. So again, it goes back to the theory. It's on board. It works better.
It's on the lanes that are tied directly to the CPU. It doesn't.
Absolutely. Somebody here has some computer knowledge. Fred, what's your background? Welcome to the panel, and I don't mean to call you out, but I'm curious as what your background is.
I actually do sports television for a living, but I work on computers. I build computers occasionally. I just finally built myself one in 2019 with all the 2019 stuff. I actually came into the 20th century. My last computer I built was in the 70s, so.
Absolutely.
But well, I work on them. I help people. I don't know that much about that stuff, but I know enough to be dangerous. I'm like,
well, that's definitely enough to be dangerous right there because I can kind of look at the faces of some of the other people here, and nobody else would have been able to pull that out.
Yeah, I just forgot what it's called. The PCI Express lanes is what the M.2 goes in, right?
It uses an M.2, which is a PC. Justin, it's the piece. It's not Express. It's not an Express, but it's a PCI bus lane, right? I think it's a PCI bus lane, but it's directly tied.
Not Express, but
it's not an Express, but I think it's a bus lane straight to the CPU, like you're saying, exactly. So it's the equivalent of having that memory right on the CPU, basically, is what it is. So it makes it quicker to process it.
And it's 64-bit wide, right? It's not
correct.
SATA.
Correct. Exactly. Not to throw you on the spot, I'm just always interested when anybody can get it. You got about as geeky as I like to get with some things, and I'm trying to stay out of that geek level to make this available for everybody to receive. And so it was like when you said that, my little geek alert went off, and I'm like, oh, somebody knows computers.
So there's a question that's coming up. I'm not sure if Ed, you're going to ask this one from Greg Gibson. Is that in streaming video production?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So in streaming video production, this leads right into what you guys are talking about. How big a role does GPU play versus GPU play versus CPU, particularly with virtual participants like a VMix call or WebRTC?
VMix is actually built in with NVEC encoding. So I would say GPU is actually very helpful when using VMix because it was actually designed in line and in thought with Intel and a GPU in order to run it. So I know Andreas is having some fun with that right now. Me and him have been talking quite frequently to help him through some issues he's having. that he's been having. So Andreas, you want to talk about that?
Well, what can I tell you is that I was having a high CPU warning besides the GPU, just because the way that they coded the videos that they gave to me.
Awesome.
So I had to go in and recode every single one of the 22 videos just to make it happen. And it went from an 89% of usage to 22%.
And I know Omar was on a job recently that he was using VMix on, and he called me and he's like, dude, what in the hell am I doing wrong? He's sending me screenshots of all this stuff. And I'm like, well, it looks like your CPU is about to fry because it was
Yeah,
at
so
91% CPU usage.
so I figured out the problem, and I won't say too much about the end client, but so apparently I was using a machine. I was brought in as a VMix operator for another show that I wasn't using my equipment on, and hadn't realized that on their machine, the graphics card was still defaults for their VMix, even though this was a much better machine than mine, and it was an actual, which we can get into this question too, but it was an actual MacBook, the cheese grater one, the new one, whatever they're calling that now. That was done on not boot camp, but or whatever they done whatever to make it PC friendly, but they forgot to change the graphics card from default to the actual graphics card itself. So my GPU and CPU were being used at the same time for VMix, and I had all these videos to play. Similar to this scenario, but it was being shared between both.
Yeah, Omar was definitely trying to burn the place down. Absolutely, Justin. I saw that. So I do see something over here that I'm going to touch on because it was just a discussion, and Bangs kind of answered it great. Michael said, trying to build a virtual production machine for my boss using a Valve Index and trying to find either a VR capable laptop with DP, that's DisplayPort, or mini ITX with 1080 Ti or 3080. It's Jeff, go big or go home. Any recommendations? I absolutely agree with James on this one. Why go 1080 or spend all that money on a 380? Like I said in the beginning, when you can get 2000 series cards that are way more capable than handling the job that you're putting it in and way more affordable at this time. So that's kind of like the discussion that I've had with Andreas recently. He wants one of those 3080 cards so bad, so bad. And I absolutely understand it. If I could afford one to throw on my computer, I would. But the going with a 2000 series GPU right now, you go with 2060 Supers, enough to do everything you need. They're about $400 to $500, or 1660 Ti's. It's still a GTX, but it still does NVEC encoding and is 6 gig VRAM, and it turbo clocks up to a 2070, same speed as an RTX 2070. So,
Hey, Bodie, sorry, I'm not sure if you're answering this one, but this one I'm looking at right now, and I'm a little taken back by this one. When a GPU specs are 2.6 gigahertz up to 4.5 gigahertz, I'm assuming that means turbo boost. Yes, that's the question. And then it further goes into, does it matter that it goes as low as 2.6 gigahertz, or should I only be concerned with the higher number? My question, in addition to Mike Graves' question here, is as far as the CPU side, what is those differences and how does that affect it on the CPU?
based on the processing that you're actually putting to that CPU. So what it's saying is on idle or low end processing power will run at 2.6 gigahertz over all its cores. When you start putting power or anything to it that it needs to think more, it can think all the way up to a 4.6 gigahertz power is what it's telling you. So like for instance, VMix usually is pretty funky and wants 3.0 gigahertz on Intel cards. So if you have a processor that's typically a base process of 2.8 or 2.6 gigahertz, and you're running VMix and it can turbo boost to 4.6, it's going to run at the minimum specs for the program that you're running. And then as it needs more power, it's going to kick that more boost into your processor. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's what it means. It's like, for instance, my CPU is 3.6 gigahertz, and it turbo boosts to 4.8. So while I'm streaming, my processor is running at 4.8 gigahertz. It's running at 20% capacity, but at 4.8 gigahertz. Then, like right now, it sits idle. It's running it's not really sitting idle, but I'm running Zoom and doing everything I'm doing here. It's kind of like 3.2 gigahertz to 3.3. So it's a fluctuating power.
Chris, we Greg Gibson asked, What's your favorite case to build in, particularly a standard build and not a custom water cooler like the case you have now?
Depends. So my favorite case is the NZXT that I showed you. That is my favorite. All NZXT cases, they're great cases to build in. They're very roomy. They have a lot of room for as far as your cabling to make sure you have good cable management, things like that. So, but they also have probably the best airflow from the case standpoint that I've seen in any case. In their newer cases, I think the newest one is the NZXT H710 is their newest one, and that's the one where they introduced side flow. So they actually built, so you have your CPU cooler over your CPU, right? They actually have on the back side of the CPU another fan to cool everything down. So they actually take their case and go, okay, how does the computer operate? What's the best way to cool it? Here it is. Let me put it together. And their cable management is phenomenal.
Cool. Thank you. I might have to.
Sorry,
I might have to look into that. I'm looking. As you know, I'm building a VMix machine in addition to this laptop I just bought, which I'm going to run VMix on. I'm building one, and I've been kind of wanting to go with the 3080 when I can finally get one. And because, like Jeff talked about earlier, not so much for VR, but for Unreal Engine and extended reality kind of stuff that
Absolutely.
I'm looking to get into.
Just keep in mind when you do it, if you get a 3080 or a 3070 or a 3090, they are about 2 months to 3 months away from being a super stable card. They whenever a graphics card is released or even a CPU is released, you have to give it a grace period of 2 to 3 months before it actually becomes a stable production machine for you to be able to use. That's with anything. I usually wait 6 months to upgrade my PCs when I upgrade them, just so they can work all the kinks and bugs out of all the drivers and everything.
As you said that about a minute ago on the Facebook side, Nino had said exactly that. Also, 20 series GPUs work. 30 series are at least 2 months from being stable.
Absolutely. So. I know right now, and I see James again coming in here and stealing all the thunder over there. No, I'm joking. Bangs is a good dude, but he is right. The 30,000 series cars are having major cooling issues right now. So that's another reason why I usually kind of just wait it out, wait for everybody else to experience their issues with them and their bugs with them, and then they correct them, and you swoop in and get them for cheaper on the dollar. So
one thing that should be pointed out too for everybody who's because there's a lot of VMix questions. I believe, I don't remember which webinar it was, but when the 3080s first came out, it was said that there's almost nothing in the 3080 or the 30 series that could benefit VMix. There's nothing that VMix can take advantage of that those cards can do.
Not immediately,
well,
no.
Right, exactly. So, if you're not going to be doing a ton of VR, go for a 20 series, go for the 1660 Ti. You can get started. It's better to get started and be working than be waiting for one of those cards.
Absolutely.
So if I hadn't bought this laptop this week for another job, then I would have gotten probably a 1660 until I could get a 3080 and then upgrade later, just so that I could get working.
And it's worth it. Like I said, 1660s, you can find them all day for $250 to $275. That's not a lot of money for a graphics card. When you're looking at waiting to pick one up for $800, it's going to be 3 times as powerful. So
yeah, and I'll echo what Ed was just saying as well. I bought this machine and it's honestly it's paid for itself already. And same thing, Boddie, we were talking about it. I wanted to wait. And actually, when I went to buy this, we had a long conversation about a bunch of other options. And this was kind of like this fed on this machine, particularly the GE66 Raider from MSI, technically fit the middle ground for what I was looking for as far as a laptop. But price point, I mean, I've had this for almost 2 months now, and at this point, it's paid for itself. So.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset shift for folks coming from Mac, especially. I know when I shifted from Mac about a year and a half ago, PC folks, the sweet spot is usually, last year's hardware. The price performance is fantastic.
Absolutely.
And where Mac guys are always like, oh, I got to get the latest one. I got to get the latest one so I can stretch 2, 3, 4 maybe years out of it if you're lucky. But a PC, well, in 2 years, you've paid for it twice and you can just go buy the next year-old model and you're just it's gonna make you money. And so just a different mindset.
Yeah,
And-
I think I break that mold of the Mac guy who needs the
You
latest thing.
definitely break the mold. Yeah, absolutely. You're the only one I know that's rocking a 2007, 2008 Mac.
No. I have a 2014. It's not a 2007 or 8. It's a
No.
2014
I gotta,
MacBook
I gotta
Pro.
defend Ed. I gotta defend Ed. Listen, I own 3 2015 MacBook Pros only because one, they run most of the software I need, but 2, mainly because they still have HDMI ports on them.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I have
Same
2
thing.
mini display ports. So I have 3 video outs from my machine.
Okay, so most of you Mac and Apple people are not going to like me right now, and I'm going to explain to you why. The case is like Dave said. Okay. Apple is great at what they do because their operating system runs on such a little bit of information. Okay. They use last year's equipment in Macs. And I'm being dead serious. And I'm not making a joke here. I'm not doing everything. If you look up the actual specs in products that are in an Apple, they are in last year's computer. So what you're getting from them is a refined product that they're working off of. So that's why you have to keep going both ways on it. Android, everything that you guys are getting with your iPhones, your little custom widgets and everything you're able to do and all that stuff. I've been able to do that for 7 years on an Android. I've had widgets since the day I got an Android phone. It's all preference, and that's the end of the story to that. I'm not going to get into an argument or I'm not being a bandwagon debate over here. I'm just saying that's legitly why when you buy a Mac, you have to always get the next one that comes out because they are using limited material and limited products. And anybody that wants to argue with me over a Mac, I'm going to shut you down real quick and real fast. Open your computer up and tell me what processor is running it. Open your computer up and tell me what hard drive is running it, because your hard drive is ran by this phone company right here, Samsung. Everything in your Apple is a Samsung. So we can fight and argue this debate all you want, but you are Samsung's bitch when it comes to everything.
It will be interesting to see when the new Mac processors, the new Apple processors start being implemented in their laptops and computers.
Here's the best part that Apple's going to do for themselves, and I'm super excited for it, and I hope they can do it. Apple is actually taking their own CPU processing into their own hands. Okay, so if they can nail that
they're
right,
taking it back. I mean,
used to. No, they never did. They never did.
Motorola.
Never did.
It was Motorola?
Exactly done by Motorola, run by AMD.
Interesting.
Yes, always.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, it's always.
I wasn't as nerdy back then.
Everything in a Mac has always been AMD run. It was run by Motorola. It was processed by Motorola. Motorola, again, is owned by who? Samsung. So them taking their CPU processing back and making their own CPUs is going to be interesting. And here's why. Because it can actually make a competitive battle between Mac and PC now. It actually will be a huge thing if they can do it right. If they can do it right, it will set Mac further apart from PC. And you might be looking at somebody who might be running off a Mac in the next 3 years if they can do it right. Because I do personally like Mac's simplicity. Mac's simplicity is by far the best there is. And as far as somebody like me, operating a Mac is run off MDOS. So it's a Linux root system. So I can customize and do everything on the back end I want without being told, no, you can't do that without special programming, or you're going to avoid Windows, shut your face. I'm going to do what I want. It's my PC. Okay. If Apple can take this CPU and they can run with it, it'll be ridiculous. And it'll set the market so far apart between PC and Apple that nobody will buy a PC.
I would kind of raise issue with that because I think Apple's going to go down the lifestyle PC path. They want this ecosystem that is just email and music and entertainment as a consumption device.
And if
And
that's
they
what they
want to
do,
be
then they're
Amazon
shooting them.
Prime
And if
more
that's
than
what
they
they're going
want
to
to
do,
be
they're going to put
IBM or
themselves.
Intel.
They're going to put themselves out of business. Is what they're going to do. So if you got any of those old iPhone 3s, hang on to them. They're going to be a relic. And I'm being honest. If that's the path that they're going to go, and that's the path that they're, and I know this is kind of taken off topic of what tonight's show is about. If this is the path they're going to go with it, they're going to make just a music machine basically out of it and a photo machine. They might as well just close shop and be done, and Steve Jobs will turn over in his grave.
Yeah, at this point, you could buy a Google, those little $100 laptops for that, and do the same thing at this point.
Exactly.
So I just want to bring us on point real quick. There's two things I want to bring up. One that Fred had said on the Facebook side, which I thought was just a good note for everybody here. Remember, if the desktop PC is going to travel to a job, a horizontal motherboard is safer for travel. So I thought that was a good note to keep everybody.
Absolutely a great note.
And there was a question in the Q&A side here from Randy Rich.
If I can throw real quick, hold on. If I could throw real quick a preference for a case that if you're going to look for a horizontal motherboard is going to be a Thermaltake V21 or a Thermaltake V20. Excellent airflow, modular box. It's square. It's small form factor. Can use full ATX boards as well as micro ATX boards. Can accept any type of motherboard you put into it. Has great airflow, and it's a horizontal motherboard, so none of your crap is going to fall and break.
So the question that came up was, and again, just to give out to the community on Facebook land and to the panelists here, we're at the last 15 minutes of the show right now, but I see a couple more questions kind of creeping in. Which port has the fastest transfer rate, Thunderbolt, USB-C, or USB 3.0?
Thunderbolt. Oh, hold on. Let's revert that. What Thunderbolt are we talking about? Thunderbolt 3?
Yes, he added that Thunderbolt 3 was what he was referring to.
Because if he's talking about Thunderbolt 3, they just had an update to Thunderbolt 3.2, which makes them faster than USB-Cs. USB-Cs are the fastest when it comes to transfer and connectivity, but Thunderbolt 3.2, which is the newest update on them, are faster than all. Most of everybody's stuff right now should be 3.2 compatible. So when they do an OTA update like that, it automatically accepts the OTA update like that.
And can I just add a crazy one here for people who are on the Mac side or PC side, right? Hopefully this is just pertaining to Mac people. If they're using a USB, if they're using a dongle that is, let's say, USB 3.0 versus USB-C, how's that affecting the internet if they're using that dongle to connect themselves to the internet versus just using a
That's a great question. It has to do with power of that dongle, basically. So my best suggestion is if you are going to be using a dongle to Ethernet, I recommend getting a powered dongle versus a PC powered dongle. And the reason for that is the transfer rate between that dongle and the computer is going to be increased. It's like a power inverter, basically. And if you use a regular Ethernet over dongle, most of those are, and it all depends on what you're going to. I mean, again, I'm talking like if you're going to be on a 10 gigabit show, you're going to want a powered dongle because you're only going to get 1 gig transfer rate over that Ethernet dongle that plugs in your computer. They do have powered amplifier ones, which allow you to do higher.
Cool. We got just a couple more questions. Does your motherboard's bus speed play a major role in purchasing a motherboard, especially from when looking for a compatible processor?
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely does. Your bus speed has to do. I have actually a diagram of that.
You would.
One that I use quite a bit. Okay. So can I get just the image pulled up? Because it's in an article that I've read before. I know it kind of simplifies it, so I'll bring it up. It's an article called "How Motherboards Work," is what it's called, and it's actually a really good article for anybody. Can you see this? I'm moving it around right here.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so your CPU has two different bridges to it. You have go away. You have your north bridge and your south bridge, and it's split just like this. So your front side bus connects to the north bridge. Your augmented GPU, which is your onboard graphics card, attaches to the north bridge, and then your memory attaches to the north bridge of a CPU. Okay. Then you have all your other components, your PCI and your memory connects to the south bridge of your CPU. If your front side bus is not compatible or not fast enough, it could contain a bottleneck for your north bridge of your CPU. So it will not operate as fast or as efficiently as you want it to. So it's always good to understand what the output of the motherboard can handle to the CPU that you're putting it in. Because if your front side bus is not fast enough, you're kind of screwing yourself. So basically, if you have a case that has a 3.0 socket on the front that you're able to put a 3.0 USB in, but your CPU does not have that, or your motherboard does not have that, then you're limiting yourself and it's pointless to have that case. Not pointless, but you understand my point to that. It's just, it always is very something that you want to look at depending on the components that you're going to be plugging into the front side bus. I hope that answered your question and made sense to everybody.
Yeah, can you drop that link in the comments so I can share it with the community?
Oh, sorry. Was I muted there? That's my fault. I was looking at too many different things. Nino Banks had asked, anyone ever use an eGPU over Thunderbolt?
eGPUs aren't bad. They do have limitations to them. Obviously, because they're not directly connected to a PCI slot, they run a little less on the bus side as far as the clock speed to them. But they are pretty efficient and they do get the job done for what you need. It's definitely an option to look at if you are using a Mac to do your streaming. You could add an NVIDIA GPU in order to an NVIDIA GPU, eGPU, in order to use take advantage of the NVEC encoding. Absolutely.
Omar, do you see any other questions? I think we might have actually gotten through everything I had.
Yeah, I've gotten through it. Well, let me just say this. We're at the last 8 minutes, everybody. I've gotten through it. It seems like Amy both are on the impression we've gone through it. If we missed your questions, please, as of now, you have 8 minutes to resubmit them down below if we didn't answer them. If we didn't answer correctly, please resubmit them and we'll try to get those through. We'll do kind of like a lightning round here. Ed will try to answer as precisely as possible without, I guess, getting to the nitty gritty of things. But like, I want to reiterate what Boddie said at the very beginning of this talk, if anybody came in a little bit later. Computers are, there's a lot of factors that go into that, you know, and as far as it comes to the anatomy part of this, right? You have the motherboard, you have a CPU, you have a graphics card, which has a GPU. Little I give you right now, all those affect every component you're putting into and cause different things to happen. You're using a hard drive versus an SSD drive versus each PCI card. All those little things will affect little minute things that may be the difference for you with one thing or another. So it's understanding this world and how intricate it gets into, just like we do in our live event side with the gear we're using, and how, you know, for me as a video engineer, maybe Ed's got one for audio, but, you know, knowing that a decimator, the big box, the up down cross converter, has a frame delay, and those little tiny boxes have has a bigger frame delay than a little tiny decimator box. Knowing that minute difference, it's a difference on my end stream about what's going to be going out and the quality that of this going out versus me using, again, a Blackmagic switcher versus a Grass Valley switcher, you know, and knowing those little minute details. Computers are just the same, if not more, because there's so many interchangeable parts. For the guys that are buying laptops out there, like Ed had said as well, get what you can get now, to use what you can do now, to get your hands on it, to get the experience, to get the work, to get out there, to start getting moving on it. Don't keep waiting, unless it's coming up with the next quarter, as Nina said, within this quarter, the next. Don't wait. Just bite the bullet now, make that money. And as David said, you're going to make your money back and just buy the next brand up to get higher. If you're going the PC route and you got to have someone building it, or you're going to call up Boddie to build it for you, just know with the PCs, those parts are interchangeable. So think about that. Get the card, the motherboard, the CPU, the GPU you want now that you need. And then when you get that newer card to come in, make sure that, hey, I want to get this card when it comes out. You let your builder know, or you just remember about it. And you say, okay, this card will also work with this card that I can get now. And then when this other card comes out, I'll swap them out for this one. So do the
And-
initial investments.
And think about it this way: if you go for that 1660 Ti, like we've talked about, versus the 3080s or the 2070s or whatever you can afford at this time and moment, you can either one, resell that card, or two, you always have a backup if something happens. I'm under the impression always have a backup. So I have a 2080. I have a 2080 Ti in my computer right now. I have the old 2080 in my closet waiting to be used if anything happens. Is it a downgrade? Absolutely. Of course it is. I'd rather have the Ti in my computer than the regular 2080. You're talking 11 gigabits of VRAM versus 8 gigabits of VRAM. Absolutely. But you can always hang on to it. It doesn't diminish over time as long as you're not throwing it against the wall or you're putting it in a dryer where you're going to electrostatic shock the entire board and destroy everything on it.
No, very, very good points. And again, I just want to let you guys out there in the community know that the goal of all these talks is to obviously get you to that knowledge. And I'll give you a prime example. Ed and me were talking a couple of days ago. I was on a show and I was having problems and I was struggling. And I knew that what I was doing works. And I knew that it had worked before because I'd heard it and I'd talked about it and asked questions. And after talking through some things, we figured out pretty quickly what it was. And it was that I had the mindset of the idea that something was happening. So take the knowledge you guys learned from here, invest in what you can right now. And I'm not telling you spend money crazy, and invest in what you can. Think about the future like you're doing it. Be smart about what you're doing. But if you're not doing anything, you're just waiting, what's holding you back at this point? We've provided knowledge, we've provided skill set, we've provided a speaker who can give you that information.
Being able to pay my bills. Sorry.
Possibly. Great example. That's fine. So if that's your concern, if you want to make more money right now, you got to spend money to make money sometimes, or you get what you're right now. Listen, I've done partnerships during COVID to make things work. I've been borrowing gear from my close companions and friends. I have people on this panel that we talk to, and we talk on almost on a daily basis every other day. We share knowledge, information constantly that helps us improve us. It has made us money. I talk to Ed all the time. It's we've transitioned between work and stuff. I've talked with Boddie and stuff off and on camera, obviously because we're family, but these talks are not just here for us to learn, but they're also for you guys. And I'm hoping that this is getting you guys the into the mindset of thinking a little bit differently and knowing that just waiting and constantly waiting for that next thing is what's holding you back the most. Just take action and start doing stuff. This is an all volunteer thing. Everybody here volunteers their time and efforts, and I hugely appreciate it. I'm so honored by that. We have amazing people on the panel every night here. Guys who I've only known by reputation that now I see on a daily basis, or at least a weekly basis, not daily, but weekly basis, people that I'm talking to now because of these talks. I'm so honored by that, not just because of my career in the industry, but just because of these talks that we're having. And I've been able to connect with people. I've talked to Jack Keeley about things as well, who's runs the Zoom test kitchen. I've talked to Dave Knob now offline, not just from work and stuff. So there's a lot of things that happen in these talks that I think people should gravitate towards. Just some of you that are commenting, I've worked with before. I worked with James Bang, was great when we did shows with him. Boddie, we were there directly too. The guy was a phenomenal engineer as far as streaming goes, phenomenal gamer as well on Twitch. Fred Lobo, a good friend of mine as well, has been in the industry for a long time. We've connected way more now because of COVID. I've a man who runs a business I borrowed gear from to help me with my business. So again, it's not always money. It's not always a money issue. If you have the connections, which you're making here by networking with us and everybody else in the community, use those connections. Find out who's close to you. Find out who you work with. Use the time now to build that, because like the rest of us here, as you're going to get busy in industry, you're not going to have that time. So take advantage of it now while you can, because once you get busy, we understand we're all in it together, right? Once you get busy again, you're going to be too busy to have anything else happen. So build those connections now, build those relationships now, get your foot in the door and push forward. Sorry, I went off on a tangent here, man. I'm so sorry.
No, Omar, that was great.
That was great.
Very well said. I do want to correct you. It's Jeff Widgren who does Zoom Test Kitchen.
Oh, what did I say?
You said Jeff Keithley, who is also a brilliant AV person who's in our been here with us in the comments and presented our NDI talk recently.
Yes.
But yes,
I apologize. So publicly,
there's too many Jeffs. Yeah, there's a
too
lot
many
of them.
Jeffs. There's another Jeff coming in soon to one of our talks.
Yep.
Jeff Woodgren is who I've been talking to. Sorry, Jeff Healy. I didn't mean to mix up the two. You've been very active in our comments though, and have been a huge help to the community and myself in the recent days. So the name's been a present for both of them.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll do this. I invite anybody who is watching. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Obviously, I'm commenting on the Facebook side. feel free to connect with me. Send a note when you do that. You watch the show so that I know who you are, because I don't always accept people I don't know. But I would be happy to connect with people. Anybody who's on this panel, if we're not already connected on LinkedIn, make sure we do that. Because I get a lot of work from LinkedIn. I've made a lot of recommendations. I've gotten a lot of work through recommendations from people in, some during this time. I have work coming up this week that somebody made a recommendation, and kind of going on my tangent at the moment, back to something Omar just said. The laptop I just bought that we've talked about a bit tonight, the job I'm doing this week required me to provide my own laptop as an OBS machine. And the Windows PC that I have here for that, they were all on Windows, and they preferred I kept it Windows instead of Mac. And Mac OBS doesn't run so well on my Mac on any Mac, I think, really. But everyone I know says OBS doesn't work well on their Macs. But I couldn't bring the PC that I have here because it was issued to me by a company I work for, and I didn't feel right taking someone else's gear on that show. So I went and bought a laptop, but the money I'm going to make from these 3 days covered the entire cost of that laptop. I'm not going to take home a lot of money, but that's paid for, and now I've got this laptop to keep doing more work until my next build is done. So Brendan Berry from OPAV, one of the things that stuck with me that he said in a meeting we were on was done is better than perfect. So if you can get something so that you start working, even if it's not the perfect machine that you want, at least it's done. It's something that can function, and then you could use to make the money to get where you want to be. With that, I do.
You see a couple of questions.
Yeah, I want to take
an answer real quick.
Let's see. I think we got to. There might be one that just came in. If you want to take that, Chris, you can.
So Michael asked thoughts on virtualization on Threadripper. Might have missed this if you had mentioned it. And also, does the Mini ITX have more performance compromise than the equally spec laptop? So here's my answer to that. Threadrippers are amazing. They virtualize everything. They're a powerhouse. They do very well under virtualization. Because the whole premise behind a Threadripper is the fact that they can run multi-core processing capabilities to the supreme maximum. And I stole that from Deadpool, maximum and everything. But anyway, yes, they can push forward hard on everything that they use. The reason why I say the Mini ITX will be better than a same spec laptop, if you can afford it, is because the Mini ITX, again, the parts are interchangeable. So it's not your end all be all. Neither is your parts in your computer, in your laptop. Some laptops do allow you to upgrade the memory and hard drives and things like that. But the Mini ITX down the road would be more beneficial for you over that laptop if you can afford both at the same. You get what I'm saying? If you did the Mini ITX over the laptop and you can afford to build it out over time, that Mini ITX will pay for itself 10 times over because you can upgrade little by little as it goes along and make it the machine that you want it to be versus that PC, that laptop that you get. You might only be able to upgrade the memory on it and the hard drive space. So it kind of comes to one of those things.
Great, thank you for taking that question. I saw it and kind of missed it.
Randy, in the Q&A section, if you want to reach out to me on Facebook, I can definitely help you if you're having issues with that. His question was, has anyone in the panel flashed their ROM memory on the motherboard and was successful? I do that for fun.
Has anybody else on the panel had any, since he did address it to the panel, anybody done that?
Not yet, but it'll be a call now to Boddie.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, with that, I want to just ask our panelists, what did you guys take from tonight? Anybody have anything that was eye-opening or that they didn't know ahead of time coming into tonight's talk?
We have a machine at my work that's been acting up with VMix, so I definitely think I have a few recommendations from what Boddie mentioned, mainly I think might be an airflow issue or possibly the CPU. So thanks so much.
Not a problem. You're muted.
Sorry. I think have we heard from Justin? I know you must be having some thoughts because you've built many a machine and you're have both feet kind of firmly planted in the Mac and PC worlds. Do you have any thoughts about what we've talked about tonight?
I think, well, I mean, there's a lot of content. I think one thing is we've talked very heavily in terms of video streaming, which is, I think, use context is a big thing we haven't talked a bit about. You know, there was a sidebar going on here, you know, because for video streaming, yeah, the Windows platforms appropriate built are going to blow the doors off a Mac. If I got to haul 64 channels of remote audio and run comms, then a Mac's probably going to be go-to. So I think the two takeaways are right tool for the right job and don't let perfect get in the way of good enough to get you the work.
Absolutely.
That was a great comment there because we did not bring that up. So I thank you for that.
I mean, I'll be sticking with my Mac for my audio applications.
Absolutely. That I have always said when it comes to audio and even graphical design. So for video editing, again, that ties into your audio, but your video editing, it's Mac. Right now, it's still Mac. The PC has not come out with anything or shown anything that can handle the video editing that a Mac can do, plain and simple. Like I discussed with everything coming down the line with their CPU and taking it on, should be very interesting in what the playing field comes out with later, because you might have some program designers going, okay, I don't know how this is going to play out, so let's split everything, and I'm going to start making a Mac component and a PC component. So Windows component.
Great. Well, if anybody has any last comments, we're a little bit over time, but I think we started a couple minutes late today too, so not a problem that we ran a little late, and the discussion has been good. Anybody, anything, Dave or anybody? Nope. Okay. Well, then with that, I guess we can start our closing of the show. First off, by thanking our panelists. Thanks, Chris, for the great leading of that discussion.
No problem.
I also want to thank all the attendees on the Zoom side, as well as our viewers on the Facebook side. Your questions have been great tonight. They led to a lot of excellent discussions. We got pretty deep on some things, and you know, definitely a good talk. Very interactive. I'm very happy about it. Again, I would also like to take the moment to thank DVE Store again for their continued support. We appreciate you guys for helping us out, giving us the better resolution. So thank you guys for that, as always. I didn't see Guy in the comments tonight, but usually he watches the show and has great things to say in the comments. I do want to remind you guys, we are back on our regular Monday schedule starting in November. I believe that's the 2nd. So stay tuned. We'll have an event page up today or tomorrow. I know Omar and I have just been slammed all week with tons of work, so we're trying to get that out for you guys as soon as we can. But it will be Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, U.S. and Canada. If anybody else has anything, otherwise we can kind of close this out.
One thing I will say, my DMs are always open. I've never shied anybody away. I've never turned anybody away. So when it comes to questions for computers or anything like that, you're always more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll answer them the best I can and give you the best response and the quickest answer as I can to you in case you need it importantly. So I do try to be very attentive to that.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chris. And again, like I said, anybody feel free to take me up on it. Message me on Facebook, find me on LinkedIn, and just make a note that you found me on AV Tech Talk so that I actually accept it and not think you're a creeper. So with that, I'm going to say goodnight, everybody. Wave goodnight to Facebook, and we will see you guys next week.